Well, for being here at the Second Ward Advisory Committee meeting again this month. The rationale for bringing this up, well, maybe before we do anything, I should really want to say the Pledge of Allegiance and a little prayer for the people in Afghanistan. So let's all rise, say a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. While you're standing, if you'll just take a moment of silent prayer, especially for the people in Afghanistan, the people that had trouble with the hurricane this past weekend in Northeast in our own country, and all the rest of the people that are suffering, but certainly those in Afghanistan. Take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Well, tonight, again, trying to pick up where I spoke last month about having the reason for the Second Ward Advisory Committee meeting, and digressing a little bit. Many years ago in the 80s, I was having a meeting and I'd bring people in for similar purposes. I was for being the Mayor's Advisory Committee, and later on then I had the Second Ward Advisory Committee after that. But then when council went to 4 Tuesday nights on a regular basis, it really became unnecessary to have such a meeting, because you could attend any one of the 4 council meetings that we had. But council recently has decided to eliminate the 2nd and the 4th Tuesday nights. We no longer have any kind of a council meeting unless it's an emergency measure. And then on the 1st Tuesday of the month, we have reports of committees and still have some legislation, and people can attend and talk. Doesn't give a lot of opportunity for communication, especially since the last year or so with this COVID. These Zoom meetings didn't seem to function as well with people to participate in what's going on in our city. So the 4th Tuesday was abandoned, basically, unless we actually had a special purpose. So I picked this up, and I thought that even though we only have 6, 8 people, whatever, here, I think it's an opportunity for you to find out what's going on, and especially since I'm the Second Ward Councilman, I'm very interested. A lot is going on in the Second Ward, believe it or not. And so I'd like to address that. And for those who are familiar, we did have an ordinance on the floor a while back that we were considering concerning the people who are residential property owners who rent the properties. And it could be a single-family dwelling, it could be a 2-family, 4-family, whatever. And it was decided, because there are problems with times when we have people who don't take care of property adequately. We do have a housing code officer, Rick Martin, a former police officer, retired. He does housing code work, and of course we have our own building. We have our own building commissioner, our building department, and he goes out and does things and checks as well. However, the hours have been reduced. Hopefully they'll be picked up. Due to the recent times, we didn't have the cash to pay for Rick to do as much time, but mostly he takes care of with grass that are growing, garbage is left out. There are times, downspouts could be falling off of properties. And we did pass an ordinance many years ago that allowed the health department, the fire department, the police department, the building department to work in together. So that wasn't always the case. They couldn't communicate with another department. There were some problems with privacy, but there was an ordinance passed that allows us to do that. So that isn't always successful, unfortunately. And when we have some rental properties, people don't take care of them adequately, then we've had some issues of trying to find the owners. Now, rather than digress and go all the discussion that's been going on, an ordinance was presented to council to require all people who have residential rental properties to fill out a new and separate application for the city. And see, Sheila's here. I know she's familiar with this process. But my view of that was the fact that we were requiring the people who are cooperating. And they're not the ones that we were really worried about. We were worried about the ones who were not cooperating. So I did develop an ordinance myself and put it on council floor, and I was on vacation. So both ordinances got tabled. But the Laws and Contracts Committee did meet last night, and we had some discussion about the ordinances, and I think at least the ones that part of the meeting were discussing and exploring the idea that going after the people who are not following the law with the county auditor and the state statutes should be the ones we should be going after and trying to make them cooperate if we cannot find them by proper and simple research. And in that ordinance, it requires that if a proper owner cannot be found, which is, you'd say, how can you not find a property owner? You go to the auditor's office or recorder's office. Well, you have situations where you have limited liability companies, an LLC, or it could have been a foreclosure on a property, and the property owner is a mortgage company down in Texas or California or somewhere. So they still have an obligation in the state of Ohio, if they want to do business here, to register with the Secretary of State, and you become what's called a statutory agent. Corporations are artificial legal persons. They're not natural legal persons like the rest of us. So when you're a statutory agent, you appoint a living human being. Many times it's an attorney, or it could be an officer of the corporation. It could be the sole member of a limited liability company. But they have to do that. And if they don't, they run the risk, in my opinion, of losing their right to even do business in Ohio. So still, you can't find them all the time. So rather than, and Todd Owens does a wonderful job, our fire chief, but to keep and spending time going out looking for people just seemed unfair and an unnecessary expense. So the way I devised it, and I did a little research and found a private detective group out of Dayton, actually, that can go out and find people. So the way it's devised is if you don't cooperate and let us know, or let the state of Ohio or the county auditor know where you're located as the business owner of a property, a corporation, or even an individual that you can't find because they moved, they could be cited to Reading Mayor's Court. It's a second-degree misdemeanor. You can be fined $250, I believe it is, and or 30 days in jail, plus cost. With the plan that I put in place was to say that, therefore, not only would you have to pay a fine and cost to the court, but you'd pay the cost of finding you. So if we had to pay a detectives organization or someone to go out and locate you, you don't have to pay it up front, but ultimately we would get reimbursed for it. And I think that's flowing in the right direction. I was happy several people were here the last time we did this and were supporting that theory. We are going to change some of the preamble and merge these two ordinances together. So we want to make it understood why we're doing this. So that's an update on the residential rental property ordinances that are before the court. I'm always talking that way, before the council. So I don't know if anybody, by the way, anytime you want to talk, as Mr. Selm, Dennis Selm, a cameraman, please come up to the microphone because you can't be heard adequately on the cable or even in the room. So if you want to say something, you're more than welcome to get up and come up and talk. So if are there any questions? I want to, yes, ma'am. Why don't you come up to the microphone? Jill, I think you have property up on Hunt Road, if I remember. Yeah. So state your name just for the record. I don't take them down, but.
Shirley Leach, and I own the property on Hunt Road, 2621, 2629. I'm registered with Hamilton County, so, I mean, is this ordinance going to make me have to do more stuff? No.
Well, the ordinance hasn't been passed yet. There's two ordinances floating around. They've both been tabled as we stand here tonight. The committee, the Laws and Contract Committee, makes up 3 members, and we don't have enough votes with 3 members to pass an ordinance in and of itself. So it's going to come before council in 2 weeks, and I think it's going to be somewhat merging some of the language from both ordinances. But the principal function, I think, is going to be what I described to you at the last meeting you were here. People that, like yourself, that are following the law, you're doing what you're supposed to do. Why should we make you go and start another application or do something further? And that's where the direction it's going now.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. I hope that pass that along to your neighbors and others as well. Now, I also, I think some of you came from the We Thrive group. It's really part of the Second Ward. I like being in the Second Ward. I think it's the center of everything in the town, to be frank with you. Everybody lives on a hill, but all the churches, most of the churches, the businesses, and so forth are in the Second Ward. So I'm real proud of being a member. I've only been in the Second Ward 76 years. I never got off the block, never got anywhere, but nevertheless, I love where I'm at and I enjoy what I'm doing. So that doesn't discount, though, that the We Thrive group that I wish Sabrina, I think she's going to try to get here. Sabrina Smith is our auditor. And Bob Ashrock was at the meeting tonight, too. So I'd like to take a few minutes if you can bring us up to speed on the We Thrive. So I thought Sabrina was coming, but you can jump in and do that for us if you will.
She may be coming. Thank you very much, Tony.
Give us your name so that
Bob Ashbrook, 221 Walnut Street, Reading, Ohio. With response to your question about the goings-on at the We Thrive group this evening, it was another one of their very good meetings.
I don't think the microphone.
It's picking me up. You're just not hearing me.
I think the microphone is working with Dennis, but it may not be in this audio
I'll look
portion.
toward you, and then you'll be able to read my lips as well. So, but anyway, no, it is a wonderful organization, and there is a lot of really spirited volunteers that are trying to advance the vitality of the city of Reading through this group, which is sponsored in part by the Hamilton County Health Department. In tonight's meeting, there were discussions on a number of items. One of which was communication, which has been something that has been a problem throughout our community in attempting to coordinate calendars among various civic organizations. So there's a group that's going to be putting their heads together to try to create some kind of portal, social media based or internet based, whereby various community organizations can attach their activities to a common calendar that people would then be easily able to access and find out what's going on everywhere in the community at any given time. So there was that, and then as you might imagine, there was a significant amount of discussion involving the efforts of the Ormans, Tracy and Pat Orman, who
by the way, do an excellent job. They're volunteers. They go all over town picking up trash.
And they've been doing it for many, many years, and they've taken their efforts to a higher level with their T-shirts and so forth, their Walk with a Purpose, and it's a kind of a catchphrase that is actually being adopted, I think, in other communities. So they've reported that they've secured volunteers sufficient to patrol 20 miles of Reading streets. So that's probably about two-thirds of the entire community. So kudos to all those people who are helping on that. And then there was talk about the general level of recycling and the incentive that is being provided us by Rumpke as a specially named sponsored community to boost our recycling efforts. And so there'll probably be an ask of council or certainly the administration to comment upon some new trash receptacles / recycling bins for the parks so that they would be coordinated in appearance and so on. So, and then there was discussion about the Mill Creek. Specifically, we were visited by Bennett Kotler, a name that you know from the Mill Creek Alliance, who was the project manager at the completion of the Reading floodplain bench. So he explained, the nature of the project and mentioned that an organization such as We Thrive could be very helpful in attracting volunteers for annual cleanups, maintenance of the bench project, which will in the future involve removing invasive species, honeysuckle that tends to grow everywhere on the creek and is obviously something that we don't want there. So there was a good conversation about all these specific things, and I'm intrigued that the group continues to have the vitality and the desire to keep going. So oftentimes groups such as this might come together with a lot of passion and then it burns itself out. But thanks to the folks that were there, I think we'll have an ongoing successful campaign.
Do I not have the right concept, though, if kudos would be to go out to some of the ones or all of the groups that did the planters across the city?
We Thrive.
We Thrive?
Yes, that was an earlier. That was an earlier.
I don't know if they can be heard, but it was asked whether the kudos could go out. I believe what you're referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong, they came up with the idea, we have planters. I didn't know we had this many, to tell you the truth. I think there were 60. and people volunteered to take care of the planters themselves. We've had in the past paid people, and other times we had a company in the north end of town that would take care of allowing us to have flowers and put them into the planters. But this past, is it this year and last year, I think? they actually have a volunteer, and they got enough volunteers for 60 of them, and some little bit of competition there. I know you see spots where some have done a little more than others, and they've done an excellent job, and it's all volunteers. It's I don't know if we paid for any of the flowers, and maybe you could tell me of that. I don't remember.
No, I don't believe so. I think it was all part of the.
They purchased their own?
Most of these were adopted by a family, and it becomes a family project. And I'm a little reluctant to mention too many names for fear of leaving someone out.
Right.
But I know that Annie Hess was instrumental in developing a little placard that is planted with each one of the plants that describes the family or organization that adopted them. So if you happen to be out in Reading and you note such a sign, and you know the people that perhaps were responsible for beautifying our city at no cost, please make sure you thank them. Giving credit where credit's due, I'm almost pretty sure that the Bridal District adopted all of the pots along Benson Street. So, those kinds of actions where the private sector is really stepping to the fore and taking ownership in their communities, those are the types of things that I think all of us, some of us of a certain age, recall maybe examples of that from the greatest generation, the World War II folks who did so much in our community with little fanfare and no expectation of thanks or praise. And it's very good, therefore, to see that a newer generation is embracing that same sort of community involvement and taking care of our city.
Thanks, Bob, for bringing us up to date on We Thrive. They are an excellent group, and I think it was Donna Wiggins is one of the people who worked on it. I'm going to do the same, the Ormans and Sabrina Smith, and there's a whole group that have been really involved, which has been wonderful for the community. And as I say, it doesn't generate a lot more expense. And Denny Albright guy, when it was my former safety service director, we used to talk that we really didn't need to have a street sweeper, as Bob was mentioning, years ago, because people went out and cut their grass and swept the curbs. They swept up the grass, and they got rid of it. So many of our parents, like he said, did that. So anyway, thank you for bringing that up to speed. Does anyone have any particular questions they want to talk about themselves about the second ward, rather than me, going down my list of issues? I would like to keep this to no more than about an hour at max, because you lose interest. But this is an opportunity, is the way I look at it, to try to communicate with your councilman and your ward, and or the whole community, if we can, we get other people to participate on a bigger and larger scale. So, any other questions that anybody wants to raise at this time? Well, then, last Tuesday night, we were fortunate to have our economic development director at the meeting, a council meeting, third one of the month, the third Tuesday of the month. And Linda Fitzgerald has been working with us. I believe when I was mayor, I hired Linda way back when to be our economic development director, and she's been serving in that capacity for all these years. She brought us up to speed. Many of you may not realize that many years ago we had a company called the Carlisle Chemical Company. It was on the north end, and it was Dow Chemical got involved. There were several, and most recent over the years was called PNC that bought it out. And then they closed it and moved all of their operations to another facility they had down in Kentucky. So it really became fallow land, and somebody bought it and stripped it and took all of any useful metals and anything they could get rid of. And now it's really an attractive nuisance. I keep bringing it up, brought it up several times at meetings, and it scares me and worries me about the condition. Now, there are other companies back there as well, and as some of you may know or have been involved, the city of Reading, Riesenberg Lane off of Columbia Avenue goes down there past the BYO fields, and we of the city participated with what's called a community development block grant. We went out and got some money back from that. I believe it was community development block grant monies, up to the tune of $300,000, and extended all the way back to the road, all the way back to where the Metropolitan Sewer District has developed a location that's cleaning up the sewer system so that we don't have surcharges of water getting into the sewage, getting into the Mill Creek, and then also getting into people's basements. So we've been working for many years to try to clean up these problems. But the thing that worries me is that there are, I don't want to invite you to go back there because I'm trying to keep people out of there, to be frank. And I'm looking towards trying to get council to, and I would solicit your support if you agree. If you don't, I'd come up to the mic and explain to me why, or convince me that I'm not correct. But there are two forms of ingress and egress. One is Riesenberg Lane that I just mentioned, that we just went ahead and put $300,000 towards it, and I know the Metropolitan Sewer District paid money to build and improve the road back all the way back to their facility. The unfortunate thing is that West Street is where the main entrance to this facility used to be, right on the other side of where the stadium is and play fields are there. And there are no barricades. There are no anyone can go back into these properties at will. And I don't really want to invite you to go back there. Maybe I shouldn't bring it up too much here because we are on cable television, but I had a very dear friend, an associate and a neighbor I grew up with. I don't remember now, probably 5-8 years ago. He was part owner of the trash place over in Hirschberg's over in Laughlin. Went to the bank and he was cashing money. He got cash. Well, he got accosted by a thief. Now, it wasn't that property, so I'm not going to fault that property, but they came out to the same area and went to the opposite side of the street, which is not as dangerous in a way, and they murdered him. They actually shot him and took his money. So I am apprehensive. It's in my ward, and that makes me worry. I don't want to have these kind of conditions exist. So I've been bringing it up that we need to secure this property, and I would solicit your support in communicating with your local councilman and/or your councilman at large and/or your city administration. I am going to actively pursue it. I've brought it up several times, and if you feel I'm in error, I wish you'd. I'm a big boy. I've been criticized a lot of times about things. So, but I'm going to solicit the possibility of getting some kind of a electrified fencing for a gate, both maybe barricade the West Street gate completely, and then put an electrified gate that people would have the controls that have a right to be back there and ingress and egress. I did talk to a resident recently, and they said, you wouldn't believe the kind of stuff that's there. I went back myself. There are junk vehicles back in there. It's an unsightly condition. Now, the question is, who's going to pay for the gate? Well, to me, it's a safety problem. I don't know the answer, but if the push got to shove, I'd like to find out what it's going to cost. We front the money, that is the city, and require that. Now, it is a public thoroughfare. Riesenberg Lane now is a public thoroughfare all the way back through there. So you get to say, well, you can't go in there and build ingress and egress. I guess you couldn't argue that. But my point is, I think that only those people who have any real right to be back there should be using that property to go in and out, or the drive. One of the reasons I don't want to jeopardize the owner, one of the major owners, because it's the Port Authority that has bought that. And thanks to, I brought up Linda Fitzgerald, Economic Development Director, is because she just reported to us that we are anticipating that they're going to work with the city, that there's getting some monies and grants to clean the site up. As I mentioned, it was a chemical company at one time, and it's been many pieces of the equipment have been dismantled. Anything that could get $1 out of it has been hauled away. The junk that's back there is just nothing but an attractive nuisance. If you looked at the original building, which years ago as a young fellow was back there, it was a really nice facility. Windows are all knocked out, rocks are thrown through it. It's such a way that if anybody wanted to be accosted or got hurt, they could easily, there's no way to stop them. They can come in off of West Street or come in on Riesenberg Lane. So my position is that we need to do something about it, but I don't want to jeopardize the growth that could happen with the Port Authority, and I don't want to jeopardize the possibility of development. So Linda reported at the last meeting that it'll take some time, and then going to happen next week or next year necessarily, but that as many as 400 to 450, 60 jobs could be created, which would bring that back to the capacity, maybe even more so than it was, you know, about 10 years ago or so when PNC and these other companies were operating back in there. And I'm real excited about that. And very happy that she's doing this. But in the meantime, I think we have a duty to try to do something about that. And part of this is to solicit your support, that we communicate in some fashion. I talked to Linda 6-8 months ago when we found out the Port Authority was going to get involved. I said, well, I would even like to see the city extend the funds if we have to, because I don't want to lose the opportunity to have this growth of this property, but I still think we need to look at protecting it. So if you have a view, if you think that the city shouldn't spend any money, we already had this issue. I see Dwayne Mounts here where the city expended funds to place controversy about the wires underground at the new development of the school system. But nevertheless, I think that we do owe a duty to protect our citizens so that, you know, if you go to the Valley Central and you walk out with a fistful of cash, I don't want somebody hauling you up to the old Carlisle chemical site and causing, you know, some kind of dismay or problems or issues of theft and so forth. The other one she brought up, which I think is important for us to know, is how many of you ever remember the old Nivus and Weisskopf company that was down already? And they made paper box cut and all those kind of things. Some of us don't want to put our hands up because then it starts to admit our ages, I guess. But nevertheless, Nivus and Weisskopf is a very profitable company many years ago, and unfortunately they were sold, went out of business. It actually became a kind of a toxic waste site. And the city, some years back, invested $400,000, if I remember correctly. Somebody can correct me if they remember the numbers. And we acquired the property, and then thanks to Linda and the efforts of both the council, the city of Reading, administration working together, we went forward and we got grants, and we did work on 3rd Street. We did put in new water mains. We actually got a road that runs past the library, if you notice. It gives ingress and egress to dropping your books off, but it also goes all the way back to the railroad tracks. And that, we've been holding off on that. We've had some people who have offered to develop that property, but they weren't the jobs that we really wanted to look for. You know, we're looking for people that are, like years ago when we had Merrill Dow, you know, when we had people making very nice salaries, high-class type jobs, professors, and professional facility, and we weren't looking for just a simple manufacturing facility that didn't generate any real revenue to the city. I'm pleased to say, she wasn't going into a lot of detail about it, but I'm pleased to say that she did advise us that she's got a potential buyer now, and the city owns the property, and we bought some additional acreage. So if you go all the way down the end of 3rd Street to where Voorhees Street would be off of Benson, you can see where the site is. It's been cleaned up quite a bit. And so I don't know what the job potential is there, but it's certainly something that's going to look better in the community, and it'll generate hopefully more revenue. And I use that qualifying discussion because in our analysis of working in government, we are looking towards trying to do some more things, and you do need to have the revenue. So you have to, and the real revenue comes from, I believe, from the industrial side, where you have industrial development and commercial development that generates the income taxes and the earnings taxes and the property taxes that we need. And it does mean that we have to have, and that's another thing I have on my list, I think we do need to be very cooperative with the school system. Sometimes some of us have been criticized that we don't get along with the school. We don't want to work with the school. I don't find that to be the truth, to be honest with you. Now, we're two separate governmental agencies, you know, and we have a duty to look towards, I do, as far as the city's concerned, what are the obligations of the city and what can we do? Well, this whole idea of doing this development with the Port Authority, and Nair and Company is one of the ones that they're looking at being the ultimate developer. You have what's called a tax incentive financing. It's called a TIF, an acronym for it. And what a TIF is, it's a reduction of their real estate taxes in the sense that the money they pay, they still pay, well, on my understanding, Brenda Weimer was there, our attorney for the city that handles putting these tax incentive financing programs together along with Linda Fitzgerald. But the school has to agree to a certain extent. So fortunately, the property as it sits vacant brings in very little of any revenue for real estate property taxes are concerned. For maybe 10, 20 years, it still may not generate money directly into the pocket of the school and into the pocket of the school, of the city, but the TIF, they still have to pay money, but they're allowed to use it for their own infrastructure of the facility, which helps develop the facility. Now, to me, that's a win-win situation. And so Brenda Weimer, our attorney who is working with us to develop this, the legislation is going to mean, is in a situation is telling us that these things are coming to fruition. So I'm looking forward to this happening. Will it happen in 6 months or a year? I don't think so. Now, I've been doing all the talking here. Does anybody have any questions? Come on up to the mic there, Mr.
Railroad going to shut down the rest of the crossings?
Come on over here and speak into the mic, sir, because nobody else can hear you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Dwight Dom. Is the railroad going to try to shut down the rest of the crossings up there?
The crossings up on,
Up where Navison is? You know, behind the library and all that? Or have I got
Oh,
the wrong
they're-
geography here?
now, I'm sorry. So you're talking about the railroad that's going through Reading and it goes all the way down to Galbraith Road, all the way across Reading Road, and
Right,
it's
right.
completely in our community.
Yep, and there was one crossing that was shut down, I think the wrong way, but,
Well, you're talking about Elizabeth Street and Boris Street.
right.
Yeah, I can't answer that. That was the PUCO, the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. That was negotiated by a different administration at some point in time. Do I like it? No. You know, are they going to close any other ones? I don't think they can do it easily. And would I acquiesce to it as a councilman? I can't speak for everybody. I would never acquiesce to closing any more crossings,
Well,
personally.
if anyone were to take a look at the rise of those crossings, anyone with any geometric brain would have to conclude that the railroad raised the levels of those crossings to keep their tracks level, which I understand from a physics standpoint. But what they did was they made it so you could film Dukes of Hazzard up there on any one of those crossings, have a nice little jump.
And it wasn't the Dukes of Hazzard. There were people who, I don't want to pick on the youth all the time to say they're doing it, but yeah, that has happened, where they went over Voorhees Street so they could go out into the midair. And
So I see behind the library, that crossing's closed.
yes, that is.
So it makes it kind of hard to get back there and look and see what the condition of the land is.
That particular roadway that you brought up behind the library that comes off of Reading Road is a new form of ingress and egress to the property that the city owns, that Linda's working on to develop. And we've been working on it. We've had some opportunities. We've literally turned them down. They weren't that attractive to us. We'd like to get another growth of some kind of pharmaceutical industry, but that was paid for by grant money from the state of Ohio. So that whole roadway.
I was there when that happened.
Pardon?
I was there when it happened. I remember
Okay.
the $400,000 figure. I do remember that.
Yeah.
So
No, I'm not talking about the purchase of the property. I'm talking about the roadway itself was a grant.
okay, that part I didn't know. But my question is the city, if the railroad wants to try to close another crossing, does the city have the guts to go after the railroad and say, no, lower your grades?
I can't speak for every member of council, or I certainly can't speak for the administration, but I can speak for myself. And we did raise those issues when they closed Voorhees and Elizabeth Street. And I think they did at one time when they closed Mechanic, and we did fight it. And I don't remember all the details, Dwight, but yeah, the answer to your question, as far as I'm concerned, yes, I would be more than ready to argue about any elimination of any arbitrary elimination of crossings. We got enough trouble. I mean, literally, Voorhees, when it was operating, when it was open, it was another way to when you were backed up on Benson, if you wanted to go south on Reading Road, that you could use that as an alternate route.
Which
I mean-
lately, I don't know if you've seen traffic at rush hour on Reading. Sometimes you might want that.
I liked it. I wasn't against it. That's why I was trying to keep Warrior Street Crossing open, because it was an alternate way to get. Now, I don't know about the people who are living back on 3rd Street, because now you've got you basically got a dead-end street, and it's, you have less traffic, so that's always part of the problem too, in life.
So there's a lot more to it than that. I hope it is sold. I hope we do get the development that you're looking for, but we got to watch out for that.
I agree. There's always alternatives to these issues. Anything, Mr. Mounts, do you have anything you want to bring up tonight? I know you're happy about the. You never cease to amaze me with your comments. So anyway, that's an area I wanted to cover. I talked about the security of the PNC property. Now I'm going to bring up another hotbed discussion that I don't know where it's going to go, and never bothered me in the past to bring them up. I'm about, 4 blocks from the old Central School property. It's where I live and where my law office is and where I do business and where I have grown up my whole life. Now, that property has been completely leveled, and it's been put in a position where it's, to me, ready to be used for some other purpose. And again, I think we need to work with the school. I'm not opposed to working with the school. I have put out my thoughts that property, I shouldn't speak to too much of it, but I don't want to see some kind of something built in there that are multi-family units that are not things that are going to generate what I would consider a vitality for our neighborhoods. And so I've done a little research. I've gone to Madeira, I've gone to Montgomery, and I've gone to other places in Blue Ash. And I'm looking forward to the possibility of what I refer to as either land dominiums or like a condominium. I don't know if you've seen them. They are built almost right next to each other, but each has its own appearance, its separate kind of entrance, and they're independently owned. And I would like to see us explore the possibility of putting in some type of residential single-family dwellings along the one side of, well, I'm not a developer, I'm not that knowledgeable in that field. I had to bend to whoever the architects and the engineers are, but I've seen them in other locations. Come along and put some kind of installation of those kind of ability of foams. I've said another place you can go is down on, I still call it Eastern Avenue. Now they changed the name. No, it's River Row or something. Riverside Drive. It's a little fancier because they put a lot of fancy properties down. They built a lot of these facilities down along there. And they're very attractive, and they're all independently owned, that go down the road. And my thought was you could run a set of those down Jefferson and a set of them down Bonnell, and then put all the parking to the rear and have a separate alleyway, driveway or something from Mechanic to Hawker, and they would be used privately for those people who are operating and living in those properties. Now, that's my idea. I mean, that's one idea. There are a lot of other ideas people could toss around. Now, the question is, thrown out is, we don't have any say over that as a city government. I don't have any right to bring that up as a councilman, or I have no right to pursue it because the school owns the property, and that's absolutely correct. The school owns the property. Now, the school owning the property doesn't mean that we cannot, as a similar but not the same as the stadium is owned by the city. And there are arguments that the stadium should be turned over to the school, or or they could purchase it. And why don't we keep it up in a better fashion? And I've got a grandson who's playing on the football team, so I have some empathy towards leaning to provide for adequate accommodations to our students at Reading High School or Reading schools regardless. However, the property that's sitting there today, I don't expect that to be given to the city by the school. I have every opinion that it would be acquired through purchase or negotiation or working together. I don't know what, I asked what the use is going to be, and they say, well, they're too much finishing up everything else that they have to do with the construction of the new facility on the hilltop, and now they're putting in baseball diamonds up where Hilltop School used to be, and they haven't gotten around to having any ideas of what they want to do with that property. Well, I think that behooves us to say, well, we have a right to think about what it's going to, especially if you're in Ward 2 where I live and we live, and you say, hey, what are you going to do with it? I want to ask the questions today, and how is it going to be used? And then, you know, I don't know what the scuttlebutt is, if it's accurate or not. If they're going to seek any kind of an operating levy, then I think that selling the property to the city would be a logical thing to do, to put some cash into the coffers of the school system. Now, this is my opinion. I haven't gone out. I'm trying to sell it to some of my cohorts with whom I'm participating in this fall's election. But that doesn't mean that it has to go there. I'm soliciting from the people in the community their ideas. I think we have a right to explore it, especially if where you live in Ward 2, or I do, you'd like to know what's going to be done with that property. I've gone so far as I've already got an estimate about having it appraised. Now, I haven't had much luck in getting the city to go along with me, so I don't expect the city to pay for the appraisal. I was told that the stadium was supposed to be given to the school years ago by an elected official here in the city. So at my own expense, I ran a title examination on it. I hired my own title examiner that does work for me to run the title on it. There's nobody else had any more right to that stadium property than the city of Reading, I can guarantee you, because I've checked the records. And if I have to, I'm going to find out what that property's worth. And I don't have any problem in seeing to it that the city pay for the reasonable price that the property's worth for how it could be developed. And I think we get our money back out of it as a city if we found the right developer. That would be my view. I'm curious of what anybody else thinks. If you have any views, feel free to say you're a crazy Gertz, forget it, or whatever you want to say. I've heard that term before, so wouldn't be the first or the last. Yes.
Is there,
Can you get up there? Well, just go ahead. I'll repeat what you're going to say. Go ahead.
rumors that there's bricks under the property at
The Reading School? Well, I would say that there's a good chance. Thank you, Mr. Dwyer. Go ahead.
I heard rumors that there's bricks underneath the property where the Reading Central School used to be.
I
that
don't
are
know the
still-
answer, but I would certainly think that there would be some serious work that had to take place to get it prepared to do some kind of development, because yes, what I saw when they were tearing it down, they didn't haul away everything, so maybe Mr. Ashbrook has some answers. Thanks, that was a good idea, Mr. Don.
I was watching that rather closely. As you know, I can see it through my front door between the houses on Walnut. And I would make frequent visits to that site, paying close attention to whether or not they were removing all of the foundations and footers. That, of course, would have been the largest obstacle to future redevelopment. And I believe they did a fairly good job of it. It's certainly not going to be like virgin farmland, but to the extent that heavy equipment that would be ordinarily present on any construction site, to think that such equipment would have difficulty removing any stone or brick or what have you that might have been left behind on the site, I don't think that should be a problem.
Well, I'm curious of what Bob? No, I'm throwing out an idea. I'd like to hear if anybody else has ideas. I would not want to see the property used in such a fashion that, you know, you live across the street and somebody wants to put a row of 6-story residential rental units, no offense with rental units. But, you know, you see what I'm saying? I don't think it's a place for, now, some talked about making it soccer fields again, and well, that's the possibility. We are talking about that issue as well. There has been some discussion. And I think there are places for that too, Sheila. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Yeah, I don't know what eventually will be put there, and I haven't really thought about it too much because, you know, I'm up on the hill. But
well, you're up there on Boardwalk
you know,
and Park
I'm up
Place.
where all the rich people live.
Oh, I got a kid, you know.
But back to working with the school and the city working together, leave me out of it because that's probably I don't know if I'll ever really be accepted for what I did, but I do know that the city and the school have to work together, and you're right as far as, you know, some people could say, well, don't you worry about what the school's gonna do up there, they'll do what they need, but no, you know, we're the city, and you're the fathers of the city, and I think, what that means is both sides come together and make a good decision. To use a thing that's gone by, like this school issue, and it was very complicated with personalities and everything, and no one will ever know what transpired there, but you guys come together. I didn't like the idea that the city had to pay anything for, I think, as far as I'm concerned, I thought Duke was totally involved by even coming up there and taking someone's word to just take it around the corner. I think they should have paid it all and walked away from it, but that's just my opinion. But I do want, you know, I reached out to Bo and anybody that was on the other side of that. I was doing my duty, you know, to question where our monies were being spent. If I saw, you know, we signed a contract that this was going to go down, and I realized it wasn't going that way. So I'm a marked person for that, and I'll take that. But
Well, I mean.
But I'm just saying,
I think maybe to explain to people what's
forget
going
about
on.
me, but I want to have the city and the school work together, because I voted to have that school put in there. It wasn't like I hated it from the beginning.
All right.
So, but I've tried to keep myself out, and I keep pulling myself in it. But I think we need to change how we come together in this room here, and where we can see common ground, we seek it, and where we got different opinions, we're going to voice it.
Well, that's, just for those people who may not know the background, Mr. Mounts lived across the street from where the controversy concerning the wires that were quote unquote supposed to be temporary from some opinions, and they were looking at variances, or not variances, change the planned development district. So, not to rehash all of that, but you have every right as a citizen, in my opinion, to voice your view, and as I do on council, and as I want you to do here tonight or any other time that I'm involved with anything, I think it's appropriate for people to. Mr. Boehner here, we've not always agreed on everything, and that's not bad. That's not a bad thing, and but at the same time, as you pointed out, I think we arrive at a consensus, and hopefully that consensus is a positive that's going to be bring us forward to the city. So anyway, that's my thoughts about that. If anybody has any other ideas, a community center has been kicked around. A new city hall has been kicked around. Improving the fire and police facilities. One of the reasons we're having some problems with this particular facility, people do not realize this, but this is actually 3 buildings. Years ago, where the tower is that they rang at what was it, 9 or 10 o'clock. For the kids to get in, they weren't allowed to be out after the time of the bell was rang, when Reading was not all that. That's why we had East Street, West Street, South Street, and North Street, because basically that was the community 150, 200 years ago. And I didn't remember that. I wasn't here, so don't try to throw that one on me either. I just heard that by my study of the history of Reading. So anyway, I'd like to kick these ideas out there, throw them out there, see what people are thinking, because too often it's not what we want to do as 7 councilmen up here. Actually, it was a former councilman, Butch Bevis, actually said, if you had every councilman agree on everything, you don't need 7 councilmen. You only need 1. You know, they're all going to agree on everything. What's the use of having 7? So it's valuable to have differences of opinion, and I think that's a good thing. But I want you to know that I think the council wants to be open. You should have the opportunity to come, and that's another reason why I want to pursue this. One other thing, I'm running I don't want to run late. I'm going to do an hour. We're at 7:20 or whatever. Anybody else, or 8:20, anybody else have anything that they would like to bring up themselves? Yeah, Bob, go ahead.
Bob Boehner, 110 Siebenthaler. I'm sure the people on Thornridge Drive would like an update on what's happening. I know that project was delayed. It looks like most of the gas line work is done. Maybe not quite all done, but they haven't even started digging for the new curbs yet. You know, and we're getting close to September. School's already started. but it just seems to be a long, drawn-out mess up there.
I wish I had the answers to that, and I'm not sure it's gas line, but they're putting a new water line in. You didn't know that? Or did you not?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're putting a new water line all the way down. It needs to be improved, and the curb cuts and that are coming across. There was some controversy over that as well, as you're probably aware. One of the things about that I like is about 15 years ago, or whatever it was, and I don't know, I think you were involved maybe at that time, the city of Reading had an increase in the earnings tax. I can't remember the approximate date of 08 or something like that, 07. And it was a 0.5% increase that we voted in as citizens. Well, council made the decision to control it, wasn't it? Sometimes I think we get picked on. Council made the decision that 1/5 of that new increase had to be used for construction of road improvements. So the money that was collected additionally, that proportionate amount to the total taxes, it wasn't, of course, 1/5 of the total taxes and 1/5 of the increase, which today is 2%. But that particular project and many other projects that have happened in the city, I think the citizens should be aware. We have been able to go after grants. When you go after the grants of the state of Ohio and you can show that you're willing to pony up half the money, you're more apt to get the grant. Before, we didn't have the cash. We didn't have the cash to pony up to say, we're willing to take a $1 million, $2 million project like Thorn Ridge Drive, and we'll pony up half the money, and the state pony up the other half. We were able to get those accomplished, and that plan came into through legislative operations of the city. And now, I mean, we're working together. The administrations make good use of it. That's what the plan was, to allow them to go out and make the bids and do these things. In addition, what's even more attractive to us, the $1 million that we have to pony up, we are allowed to borrow from the same fund at no interest for 20 years. So it's not like we're had to pony up the $1 million at one time that we got for that project. So that was one project. We've had numerous other projects. The project that you had to deal with Hiley Drive and the whole installation of the water going through, that we got some grant money for that. So we've been using the system quite well. I mean, I think, as overall, as both the legislative branch and administration, the city. But again, to answer your question, I don't have the answers because it's really the administration is overseeing that. The only good thing I would say about that project that I like is that we have I guess gets you in trouble. We truly have a hometown contractor, the Alita Company, who has got that project, and they do excellent work. They do get the job done. If there's things that are happening that are problems, I can assure you it's not because they've been faulty about what they're doing. And actually, to digress a little bit about this purchase of the school land up here, I think it ought to be known that the city, through some grants, ponied up about $800,000 for the ingress and egress for to get in and out of the new school property. We did all the work on Columbia Avenue, Benson Street, Balser Drive, even the new poles that were holding the traffic controls. That came through I believe a community development block grant, or I can't remember which one of them, but it was a grant money. It was $300,000 or it wasn't that much. I think it was $125,000. But you know, we go after everything we can try to get, and I think we do it efficiently as a group. Do we always agree on everything? No. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So anyway, I don't want to go up by too far, but if I have I only got 5 minutes, I'm going to try to keep this to an hour each month. I'd like you to come back. And you don't have to wait to come here. We do have the first Tuesday of the month that allows for people to come up to the microphone and say your piece or say what you want. And we've had some pretty vocal things over the last years. I'll never forget, we had I thought it was pretty interesting. I don't know if I was service director then or not. A fellow came in with a bucket. It was a bad rain, and he had gotten some flooded. And he took the bucket, and when he threw it, it was full of paper mache. And I thought, I was waiting for a bucket of water to come flying out, you know. So we have had some interesting council meetings at times. So, but he wanted to make his point because of what he was suffering. And there's no problem with that. You can come here. I see this growing in the national basis. I don't know how how you each agree on what the school boards are doing throughout the United States on what do they call it, critical race theory. You can agree with it, you can disagree. That's why we're free in this country and it's America. But at the same time, a lot of the parents aren't real enthused about some of the things that are going on in the country, and they're becoming much more vocal. But we have that right. We have that right to say what we want, and I think you should exercise that right here as often as you can. So I had another issue I wanted to talk about, the building department in some more detail, but I guess I'll have to wait for another night or another evening because I don't want to keep you here. I don't want to be like the pastors and the priests that go too long and then the people in the pews fall asleep on them. So I don't want to have that happen to me tonight. I can't handle that one, you know. So I thank you for coming tonight. If you have any questions, certainly ask me now, or you can call me anytime you want. My phone's in the book. It's really, I've left the block I live on for all my life, so you can come down to my office and eat up the candy so I try to stay on my diet. So thanks for coming, everyone. Thank you, Dennis, for doing this.